I'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that I have recorded this presentation in the seized areas of Northampton and Holyoke, Massachusetts, which are both on Pocumtuck and Nipmuc land. I'd also like to acknowledge our neighboring Indigenous nations, the Wampanoag to the east, the Mohegan and Pequot to the south, the Mohican to the west, and the Abenaki to the north. I encourage you to use the Native Land website in this slide to look up the original inhabitants of the land you call home.
Hi, I'm Avery Maltz, and I'm a biology student at Holyoke Community College. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about how biological systems of mutualism, such as forest systems, can serve as models for anti-oppressive human systems. By studying mutualism in biological systems, we can better model our own relational systems interpersonally and on the collective level so that we can live sustainably with each other and with the planet.
First, I'll introduce the work of Dr. Suzanne Simmard and give an overview of complex systems science as it relates to forest systems and social change movements. Then I'll discuss Dr. Barbara J. Love's liberatory consciousness strategy as a feedback loop in anti-oppressive frameworks. Dr. Suzanne Simmard, a Canadian ecologist, discovered that trees communicate with each other by sharing resources through vast fungal networks in the soil. Dr. Simard's discovery is changing our understanding of the natural world from a landscape of harsh competition to one of altruistic mutualism. Dr. Simard has utilized complex systems science to study forest systems in order to observe dynamic patterns of behavior across spatiotemporal and organizational scales. Complex systems science allows us to make connections and study the relationships of systems so that we can apply knowledge and gain insight across various fields of study.
So, within a forest system, self-organization is what happens when the system responds to internal changes. We can see this within our own bodies when we think about homeostasis. Adaptation is what happens when a system is responding to changes in its environment. With both self-organization and adaptation, we can observe emergent patterns in complex systems, such as very small scale changes that lead to larger results. In a biological system, we can observe emergent behavior in murmurations of starlings when one bird will make a turn and the entire flock will turn with it. A great example of emergent behavior in grassroots activism is the second wave feminist movement. It started with lots of little consciousness-raising groups that were just groups of women here and there sharing their stories and talking to each other. And that started to gain momentum and roll into a bigger movement. And all of these little actions all across the country culminated in a huge march on Washington, D.C. that changed the course of history. Forest systems use biodiversity as a heterogeneous strategy for survival. That diversity of life makes the whole system more adaptable and more able to respond to internal changes in its environment and external changes. And that ensures the longevity of the whole system. So biodiversity leads to resilience. In social movements and in grassroots activism, diversity of opinions and ideas and lived experiences is really important because it ensures that the movement has resilience and is actually serving the needs of many different types of people.
We often think of hierarchy in terms of a power over system of oppression, but that's only one type of hierarchy. The human body uses organizational hierarchies for survival, and a phylogenetic tree is a useful hierarchy that allows us to view evolutionary relationships. This is a system of interconnected tree relationships that Dr. Simard and her team mapped out through their research. The larger circles are hub trees, the biggest and healthiest trees around, which allow them to make the most connections and distribute the most amount of resources and information. This is a diagram of donut economics developed by economist Kate Raworth. The collective needs of society are positioned as a horizontal hierarchy, creating a circle, with an inner limit of scarcity and an outer limit of detrimental growth. By intentionally creating different systems of hierarchy, we can dismantle oppressive systemic power dynamics and build new anti-oppressive systems based in mutual aid and equity of resource distribution.
Now, we usually don't think of trees as having a memory, but forest systems do have a biological legacy. When a researcher observes a cross-section of a trunk or a branch, they're able to read lots of detailed information about the weather conditions and the conditions of the forest throughout the tree's entire lifetime. In order to create societal change, we must have a sense of historical context. In order to shift a cultural narrative, we have to know where that narrative came from and who is perpetuating that narrative and who it benefits. Nonlinearity in a system occurs when the input of the system is disproportional to the output. Again, we can see this with emergent behavior, where a small action can set off a big change. In complex systems, any small change can set off a variety of different reactions, and it's not as predictable as input A leads to output B. This is why it's essential to view human relationships and the collective global system of human interaction as a complex system. By focusing on the relational quality of all the elements that make up the system, we can be better prepared for the uncertainty of the future. By becoming familiar with the characteristics of a complex system, we can envision better futures and create innovative solutions to the problems that we face on a global scale. If we want to create lasting structural change and cultivate a new global paradigm of mutualism and liberation, then we must think in terms of complex systems. By focusing on the quality of the relationships that build our systems, we're able to ensure that those systems are based in mutualism and anti-oppressive frameworks. We can start by creating small-scale feedback loops internally and interpersonally, and then scale that up to the collective level. The complex system of a forest has many built-in feedback loops to ensure that it maintains homeostasis and that all of its functions are running smoothly. As humans in vast social networks across the globe, we have the ability to intentionally create these feedback loops to ensure that our systems are sustainable.
Dr. Barbara J. Love is an activist and author who was instrumental in starting the lesbian feminist consciousness-raising groups of the second wave feminist movement and has been working to dismantle oppressive systems ever since. She went on to develop a 4-step strategy to dismantle internalized socialization of oppressive systems and build liberatory consciousness. Systems of oppression are not inherent to humanity. We are socialized into them and can dismantle them from the inside out by developing liberatory consciousness. The 4 elements of liberatory consciousness describe an ongoing daily process of divestment from systemic oppression that can be practiced by anyone. Awareness is the act of intentionally noticing oppression on the personal, interpersonal, collective, and systemic levels. Analysis is the process of interpreting this information to determine the best course of action. The action step is crucial. Without action, there is no liberation. Accountability closes the feedback loop and ensures that the impact of our actions are aligned with our intentions.
On an internal and interpersonal scale, when we have awareness, analysis, action, and accountability around our own positionality, then we're able to create mutually beneficial relationships internally and in the systems around us. When developing large-scale mutually beneficial systems, we can take these 4 steps and apply them at every level of the hierarchical scale in order to make sure that our overarching systems are functioning from a place of mutual respect and anti-oppressive frameworks. By using a biological model of a complex system, we also are able to cultivate a more mutually beneficial relationship with the environment. That ecological awareness is much needed at this time of global climate crisis. When faced with large-scale systemic problems, it can be difficult to know where to start. But on the level of the individual, we know that we are systems within complex systems, and we can intentionally create emergent phenomena that will drive change. In our everyday actions, we can choose to create mutually beneficial relationships, and we can think in terms of systems so that our small day-to-day actions are rippling out and creating large-scale change. And the key to this is focusing on the quality of the relationships that we build. By utilizing Barbara J. Love's 4-step liberatory consciousness strategy as a feedback loop to ensure that our actions are aligned with our intention, we can create change across scales and across systems. Just as every great redwood tree started from a seed cone the size of my thumb, all of our great social movements start from interpersonal interaction and small-scale activism.